I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today, we are continuing our discussion of Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. We'll be discussing chapters 10 through 12. You know, guys, spoiler alert, trigger warnings, look it up. And as always, I will remind you that we are discussing these characters, specifically Rowan, as fantasy characters. And what we like from our book boyfriends, we don't necessarily like in real life and are not, you know, an endorsement of doing these behaviors in reality. So just keep that in mind.
It is fiction.
Yeah, fiction, fantasy, Rowan. We're going to talk more about that pretty boy later on. Deb, will you please share our nerdiest cocktail?
Of course. Tonight's nerdiest cocktail is named Goddess of Chaos, and it's themed after a pretty boy's crush.
Aww.
And this drink pairs well with the worst dinner party ever, accidental rejection, and gold star boobs.
Yes.
Yes.
And it may cause a date night to go awry.
Yeah.
It's fucking delicious.
It really is.
Just made Whitney make me 2 more.
Just to be stocked and
One
ready.
for now and one for later.
Yeah.
I can't have dairy, so we use nut pods, and it tastes like chocolate milk.
It really
It's
is.
so
It's really good.
So good.
Highly
so
recommend.
recipes on ournerdieasthing.com. It's on our Instagram. It's really everywhere. If you can't find it, we can't help you.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much, Deb, for that description. It is a
And
delightful.
for demeaning our guests.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I'm just kidding. If you can't find it, please message us.
Yeah, we'll help. We'll help you. Just ask us. Mindy, the wheel has spoken.
It has.
And whose turn is it for the
Shouted,
recap?
Whitney.
It's my turn to do our nerdy and dirty recap. I have 30 seconds to tell you guys what happened in this section of the book. And guess what? I remembered my notes today. So we're already doing better than the last time I had to do the recap.
I mean, you still did really well.
I know.
So.
Well, here we go. All right, 30 seconds and away we go. So Rowan and what's her face, Sloane, they go to a dinner party with a killer, and poor Rowan gets roofied. He eats some butt beef, and they they find some semen ice cream in the kitchen, but Sloane wins. She does not get roofied. She kills the dude. We've got David acting super weird. What's up with that character? We find out more information about Lark and why Sloane is the way she is. Sloane loves him. They go on a date night, but he has to leave because his kitchen blew up.
Wow.
That's pretty much
That was pretty good.
Whew, I had like 1 second to spare.
That was good,
like
though.
sneaking peeks at the time.
But
the
that was a
countdown.
downer
like,
ending,
ooh.
right?
We would have had
Ooh.
more time if we hadn't busted up Black.
Butt beef.
Yeah.
Title of the episode. There we go.
There it is. Butt beef. I'm putting it in the show
Oh
notes.
man, that was one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. That was not my recap of this section of the book. Was the butt beef. So, Mindy, will you please share our nerdiest vocabulary for today?
I will. I've got a very quick and dirty. I don't know if it's dirty, but
That's just,
If it's dirty,
that's how
don't
I
make
like,
it quick.
yeah, that's how I like it.
I mean,
girl.
I guess it could be considered dirty.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I just saw your notes, and sorry, listeners. I almost messaged you and asked you to do this word.
Oh, that's funny.
Ooh.
Yeah, I loved this word. It stood out to me. Sloane in these chapters uses the word skullduggery,
Oh yeah.
which I think is hilarious. And one of my favorite parts about it is because after Sloane accuses Rowan of skullduggery, he says, "Skullduggery. Should I take this as a sign that you've moved on from dragon smut to pirate porn?"
I gotta say, dragon smut and pirate smut are very different from each other.
That is true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will read almost everything, but I have said before on the podcast, I can't get into pirate fantasy. I just can't I don't know what it is.
I think I picture yo ho,
Right.
arg.
You got to picture the guy from a Hook from Once Upon a Time.
Oh, yeah, that's a good.
That's how you
I
do
just
it.
did.
That's how you do it right there.
That works for me.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, Killian. Yeah.
Goes and pulls
right.
out my pirate smut.
Tell us about skullduggery.
So skullduggery, it means underhanded or unscrupulous behavior or like trickery, right?
Oh.
And it's derived from the Scottish word skullduggery, which means This is hilarious. It means fornication, lewd conduct, or obscenity.
Sorry, I was busy doing the skullduggery.
Rowan definitely does a lot of that.
Of course, we American Puritans had to clean that up a bit.
Sure. As we do.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I thought that was just a fun
that.
word.
It
That's
is.
one of those that's like, I want to use that in my daily life one time.
My sister has words like that.
Yeah.
Fisticuffs is one of her favorites.
Oh, I love that. It's like an SAT word.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. I love that. That stood out to me too. I'm glad you did that, Mindy. Thank you so much. The English teacher in me loves it.
And the word nerd in me.
Yeah, exactly.
I do love how it popped out for all of us.
I know,
Yeah.
that's funny.
What does that mean? I literally, because I was reading on Kindle and I literally highlighted it because
Oh,
it's such a
funny.
weird word,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, let's go into our favorite moment from this section of the book. What did you guys pick for your favorites?
Since you already talked about butt beef, my favorite part is Rowan passing out face down in human rump roast after he declares his love for Sloane.
I know. So sweet.
This actually leads into my favorite quote from this section of the book, too, where he says, Sloane is the most beautiful girl in the world. And then my brother called me a feckin' idiot because I could have all the pussy I wanted in Boston, but instead I've taken a vow, he says, of obstinance. And she's like, abstinence. And he's like, abstinence over a girl who doesn't know me. And then he just fucking passes out face down. And it's so sweet.
It really is.
I love it so much.
Yeah, I love that too.
Drunk Rowan is like perfection.
Yeah, he goes from golden retriever cinnamon roll to like ooey gooey
Like
melt
simp.
in your mouth.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so cute.
It really is cute. That was one of my favorites. I didn't really pick a moment. I picked 2 overall scenes, and the dinner scene is one of them. It's so funny to me.
He has laugh out loud funny.
He
the
has
whole
no
time.
idea what's going on. Like he's just like followed Sloane and has no idea what to look out for. Doesn't take cues from her at all.
She goes lobotomy, and he goes, "You love me."
Yeah. Like doesn't register that she's like not drinking the wine, that she's not eating the food. Like he is not following her lead at all and gets himself into trouble because of it. But the grossness of it and the humor is so entertaining. It's so well written, and as awful and gross as it is, it's still cute. Like he is cute in that dinner scene.
This
is
a scene we have never read in a book before.
Oh, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
it is comedic,
completely
genius,
unique.
right?
Yes.
I have never read before.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And I also really love just in general the gala scene, even though like it ends kind of awfully. I love seeing Sloane being vulnerable and like how excited Rowan is when he realizes that she thought she was coming on a date and she came anyway. Like it's so sweet. It's so cute. I loved so much of that. Those were my favorite.
That's so funny because that was basically mine too. Because I had written down that I loved Rowan's drunken admissions to Sloane.
Yeah.
And then I also loved that moment when Rowan realizes that Sloane didn't come to Boston just to get all murdery. Like his just awe-stricken way he says, and you still came. It's just so precious.
I know.
You know what though? It's really good writing because in the previous chapter he has like essentially confessed his love for her drunkenly, right? And then Brynn Weaver is such a good author. She puts you inside of Sloane's head and convinces you by the end of that date that he may not be into her.
Yeah.
You are feeling what she's feeling and you're like, oh no, what if he's not into her? And he just confessed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally 5 pages before.
It's so 100%.
Yeah, the writing is chef's kiss in this book.
Did you have more than one favorite moment too, or was that?
Well, that was my 2. Yeah.
No, those were both okay. Because I was going to move into my least favorite because it's the end of the gala scene. Is my least favorite moment. Just that immediate switch. It's just like when Sloane goes to his restaurant in Boston, right? I said the same thing. Like I loved seeing her be vulnerable and just like go for it, which she's doing again with the gala. And then there's that immediate like, oh, this didn't work out the way I thought it was going to, and it's a big bummer. But when she realizes that he invited her for like a murder adventure and not an actual date, and like her disappointment, and then he has to leave as soon as he realizes what's going on, and he's like so happy, but then he gets the phone call, he gets more than one phone call, and he just like leaves her there. I wrote, this is a real roller coaster of emotions. Like that whole scene.
I mean,
it was
when
hard.
You own a business, you are
you gotta go.
What it is,
You can't put it off. Yeah.
Right. You can't say like, oh well, someone else will take care of it.
Yeah.
because I think people maybe that like maybe work for like a big company or something might see that is like a little, what's the word I'm looking for, insensitive, right?
Like a workaholic kind of thing.
But I see it as he literally owns a restaurant. He's opening another one, and his whole stove just exploded.
Yeah.
He has to go.
It's like his whole life. Yeah. That was a riff. What were your all's least favorite moments?
Well, I had a few small moments. Of course, I'm a vomit phobe, so that part wasn't super great for me.
Yeah.
When he's vomiting.
Yes.
I didn't like that either. I wrote in my notes, that's true love. When she's like helping him,
No,
getting the
thank
bowl
you.
for him, I'm like,
No.
If
I've only ever done that for my kids.
I was
That's
going to
it.
say, if Robbie, bless his heart, he got really bad food poisoning a few months ago, and I was like, well, see you later. I
would
went
be
and
me
slept
as
on
well.
the couch and just left him in there. But
too.
anyway, the vomit stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and then semen ice cream, just semen ice cream. I'm just going to leave it at that. But then really the real one is that moment that I realized that the reason Sloane kills degenerates is because she and Lark were likely sexually assaulted at school.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my least favorite too, and I actually wrote down a few things about that. So we learned that an educator offered opportunities to those gifted in the arts and promised a safe place to learn. We learned that Sloane learned how to keep her rage and darkness controlled, like under a mask. We learned that her tipping point was learning that Lark was also getting abused.
Right.
Like she was almost cool with it just happening to her as long as it didn't happen to anyone else. And then we also learned that Sloane waited in the dark for him and then killed him and vowed to eradicate all the people like him from the planet. So it was kind of like her, what would you call that in terms of a serial killer?
Her origin story.
Her
Yeah.
villain origin story was
Or the
this guy.
tipping point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Awful. And I mean, we've even said like we don't know much about what actually happened.
Right.
I mean, this is a lot of information, but I do still feel like there's a lot to reveal.
Oh, absolutely.
100%,
There's
yeah.
definitely much more to the story.
Right. I want to know how she killed him. Isn't
I know,
that awful?
right?
I know.
That was actually my biggest revelation, that whole backstory. And she does mostly focus on Lark because she says, like, if it had just been me, I would have not done anything. But she also makes a comment. I didn't write down what the exact quote was, but she says something to Rowan after he wakes up from being roofied that she like knows what that's like. Like she knows what that disorientation feels like, which tells us that she's been like she knows what it's like to be drugged, right? So putting all that together with everything she says about that section on Lark, she's definitely been drugged and like assaulted while she's been under the influence of whatever she got slipped.
Can we just
I know,
not?
it's horrible.
Yeah.
Can we just
It's
not?
horrible.
Just, I mean, here's the thing, guys. Is if you're not an asshole, you can find a woman that probably will want to have sex with you. You don't have to do this. I know it's more about that. It's more about power and control.
Yeah.
But like, you could find someone who finds you attractive. Like, you don't have to drug women. Like, stop it.
Well, and also there are people out there that want to be dominated,
Right.
in a safe environment, a safe
Right.
way. So there are
Trusting, yeah.
ways
It
to
has
like
to be
get
a trusting relationship, right?
So I guess that's the kicker there. They probably don't have that kind of trust, but
Yeah.
Harley LaRue has a series called The Losers, and it's a Why Choose, and she has like rape fantasies, and for me, as someone who doesn't have those fantasies, they're a little hard to read.
Yeah.
Because it is all consensual, but the whole thing is she acts like it's not. Like it's an agreed upon thing beforehand, and it's a trusting environment. But again,
I would have a hard
like,
time with that too.
I
yeah.
would too.
but that's what
Sure.
what she's into, and those
Right.
guys are into.
Right.
And again, I've talked about this several times. There's aftercare, and they're in a loving relationship, and like so. Yeah, I mean, there's a lid for every pot. If you're into that, then there's someone else who's into that too. You don't just stop it.
Yeah.
Why do we have
Quit
to
being
be
horrible.
so scared to take a drink of something at a bar, guys?
I know.
Quit being. I just reread L. Kennedy, The Deal, the first off campus, and one of the characters has some PTSD. Basically, she was roofied and assaulted, and she doesn't drink. She doesn't drink anything when she's out in public. She brings a water bottle from her own dorm, and that's all that she has. And like she's very understandably like diligent about it. And it's that same kind of like why do we even have to think about that?
It,
You know?
there is a. I mean, I know that men are also sexually assaulted, but generally men do not have to worry about their drinks when they're in public. They don't have to worry about walking by themselves. Sorry, this could be a whole other episode, but just fucking stop it. Just
I know,
stop
right?
it.
I did have a part 2 to my biggest revelation, kind of along the same lines with finding out more about Sloane. You know, Sloane very clearly has a fear that the people that she loves will leave. right? That she's going to get left by people that she cares about, which is why she's having such a hard time admitting how she feels about Rowan, right? And I wrote in my notes, this is kind of a bummer, but I really relate to that. Just, whether it's rational or irrational, that fear that the people that you love will leave you. And I have an anxiety disorder, and that's a really big part of it for me. And I was thinking about it, and this is where the biggest revelation comes in. I think that's why I like dark romance so much, because it's people that are, quote, worse than me, and like they find somebody to love them and stay with them even though they're not like perfect people. And so I think that's why I like dark romance, because it's like, well, I can have flaws too, they're not as bad as this,
right?
And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that really makes any sense.
I think
but
the reason I like dark romance is, again, because it goes back to that trust. The only dark romances I haven't liked, and this is my own personal thing, it is okay if you like a dark romance without that. It's fine. But for me personally, all the dark romance that I love, it may get really dark, but there is a trust there that everything's going to be safe and consensual.
100%.
Even if you're acting like it's not.
The deep care, the deep love, is there, even no matter what they're doing.
Right. Because I think people think that those types of relationships, like you could have like a one night stand like that, but you really can't. It has to be, there has to be.
I would argue you shouldn't. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There has to be a foundation there for that type of relationship. And again, I want to point out Gina Maxwell does a really good job of that in her books.
Yeah, 100%. What were your all's biggest revelations?
Mine was just the whole cannibalism of it all.
Accidental cannibalism.
And like that's really just going back to my first read. But even in this reread, like realizing how long she knew what was going on, and then for it to, I don't know, just
at the dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she definitely walked in knowing exactly what was happening, which is why she didn't
when they
drink.
were at the bar the night before.
She was fishing for that invitation. Yeah. She knew exactly what was going on.
Almost like Rowan has to follow her around because he can't figure out shit on his own.
I know.
I mean, he's like in this scene, I feel like he's that guy when you do a group project that he's like, I'm going to just like do what you do. You know what I mean? And not do any of his own work. He'll just
I'll just like put my slide in at the end.
Yes. Like, come on, man. Yeah. I'm actually going to go ahead, since we talked about cannibalism. Speaking of cannibalism, I wanted to do a deep dive on Thorsten. Is that how you say this guy's name? Thorsten Harris, which is okay.
It reminds me of Thurston Howell.
I know.
I keep saying Thurston.
I kept writing Thurston and like having to recheck it.
So if I say Thurston later, I'm sorry. I mean whatever you just said.
Right. So I was trying to figure out if Thorsten Harris, the dinner party man, if he was based on any real person, any real killer. So I was trying to look up like wealthy, super wealthy killers or like wealthy cannibal killers, whatever. And so I found this case. You guys, this is so insane. So I found this case about a Japanese killer named Issei Sagawa. And first of all, let me just say this. There are so many details that I am not going to share because personally, I find it very like disrespectful to the victim that we're talking about. And so there's a lot more details if you're interested, if you want to go look it up, but they're rough. The stuff that I'm going to tell you is rough, but there's a lot more. And it really bothered me. And I'll tell you more about what really bothered me about it when I finish telling you the whole story. So we're in 1981. Issei Sagawa is a 32-year-old Japanese PhD student in France. And he invited one of his classmates over for dinner to work on a project together. This classmate was 25-year-old Renee Hartvelt, who was a Dutch woman, also getting her degree. They were getting their PhDs in literature. They were in lit classes together, and Issei told her that he wanted to work on translating poetry together for an assignment. So both of them, are not native French speakers, right? So they would presumably that would make sense to need help. So little did Renee know that Issei invited her over planning on murdering her. And while her back was turned, he shot and killed her, raped her corpse, and attempted to eat her, but his teeth weren't sharp enough. So he left her body in his apartment to go buy a butcher knife and then came back and used that to eat several parts of her body. These are the details which I refuse to tell you because I think it's really disrespectful to Renee. So once her body started decomposing, he decided he was done, basically. He dismembered her body and tried to dispose of her in a park lake. He had her body parts in 2 different suitcases, and he was caught by police red-handed, literally with her body in like holding these suitcases, right? So he was caught red-handed by police. He was arrested at that point. And I know what you're thinking right now. Whitney, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
Right.
Whitney?
So, like, what does this have to do with Thorsten Harris? So, a couple of things. So, first of all, the whole lure coming to a dinner only to be murdered and eaten, like, that's exactly what Thorsten Harris is doing with people, right? But also, like Thorsten Harris and Butcher and Blackbird, Issei Sagawa was super wealthy, like super wealthy. And really, his dad was super wealthy, and him by extension.
This was his only victim.
I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second.
Okay.
So Issei had attempted similar crimes in the past, and he was arrested and charged with attempted rape. And in actuality, he followed a woman home, and his intention was to kill her and eat her, but she woke up and assumed that he was there to sexually assault her. And so when she called the police and he got arrested, he just let everybody think that's what he was trying to do. And they had no idea that it was worse than that, right?
This just shows that, like, all these times because you hear this all the time in serial killer cases where they're like, well, they had a record, but the judge was just like, don't do it again.
Yeah.
It's going to get worse.
Right. Like, that's the thing.
Just
though,
wait.
Like, all of these things that happen, it could have been just like, if you had locked that fucker up, these people wouldn't have died.
If you had done this properly the first time.
Right.
Yep. 100%. And it gets worse. So,
yay.
yeah. So he is arrested for this alleged attempted rape, which really was attempted murder and cannibalism. And his daddy paid a settlement, and the charges just straight up got dropped. So this happened in Japan, and it was a few years after that he left Japan to go to school in Paris. So he's in a completely different country now. And this is also the early 80s. So late 70s, early 80s when he was in Paris. So they did not have the computer system to be able to look people up the same way that we do now, right? So they didn't all, not everybody had all the information because he was going from one country to another. So when he was arrested for the death of Renee after being caught with her body in suitcases, his dad financed a very good defense attorney, and Issei was actually held for 2 years before he was found clinically insane and unable to stand trial in France, which very questionable who those doctors were and who paid for that.
I was going to say,
they
got their palms lined with.
Right. And 2 years of this, I don't know how, early 80s French justice system works compared to like American. I don't know. But 2 years is a really long time to not have stuff happen.
You might have a trial that takes a long time in the U.S., but usually if it's something like this, they would be behind bars awaiting trial.
I think he was.
Oh, okay.
But when he was found clinically insane and therefore unable to stand trial, the judge sentenced him basically to like life in a mental institution. So, okay, you're unfit to stand trial. The charges get dropped because he's clinically insane, right? So he's in this mental institution. He's supposed to stay there indefinitely, but shit happens.
He doesn't.
So
Daddy
a book
forked out some money again.
Well, so a book gets written about this whole case, and it's a very unusual murder case, right? The cannibalism of it all and all this stuff. And he gave interviews to this author. This book became very popular in Japan, especially, and also in France. And he kind of became this like weird, kind of like a Ted Bundy. Like everybody knew who he was, right? He was kind of a famous serial killer, whatever. And at some point, somehow, that leads to the French authorities deporting him back to Japan in 1986. So he was only in France for 4-ish years from the time that they arrested him to the time that he got deported. But it's very unclear like what exactly happened and why they sent him back.
Before or after he murdered this person?
This is after.
Okay.
So he was arrested for Renee's murder in 1982. Okay. He gets deported in 1984. He gets sent to the mental institution, and then he gets sent back to Japan in 1986. But again, like it's very vague, like why they sent him back to Japan. But this book and all of the attention that he was getting has something to do with it. I'm just not really sure how. So he gets sent back to Japan. He goes to Tokyo. As soon as he lands, he is immediately committed to a mental institution. And you'll never guess what happens.
He breaks out.
No.
He eats somebody there.
No. You really
we can't guess what
I know. I was like, you guys, you really aren't guessing.
It's not that obvious.
It makes it more exciting, I guess. So he is found completely sane.
Oh, of course.
And
Shocker.
competent
Yeah.
to stand trial in Japan. But they had already dropped his charges in France. So he couldn't get tried in Japan for a crime that he committed in France against somebody who wasn't even a Japanese national.
But also, you can't be charged with the same crime twice, right?
Exactly. And so there's some kind of paperwork issue. The documents in his case were sealed, and the French authorities didn't want to or wouldn't, unclear. They wouldn't unseal the documents to give the Japanese authorities all the information about this case. And so since they didn't have documentation, since it wasn't a Japanese victim, since he had already been found unfit to stand trial and the charges got dropped, they couldn't do anything.
They had fucking fax machines. Fax the paperwork.
They wouldn't unseal him, though.
You
that was
gotta
the
wonder
issue.
if there was something incriminating in there, like they got paid off or something. You know?
Exactly. Rich dad.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of questions here. And again, it's the 80s, so there's not as much of a digital. It was easier to get away with stuff like this.
Everyone was doing coke and eating sushi. They were busy.
I know, for real, right? So they have no legal standing to arrest him and do anything to him in Japan. He had confessed to this crime completely. They found him with her body. They found physical evidence in his apartment. He told them like painstaking details about what had happened. They couldn't do anything. So when all this legal nonsense is happening, once they realize that they can't arrest him, they have no legal standing, he checks himself out of the mental institution and lived the rest of his life as a wealthy, free piece of shit until he died in 2022. He was never held accountable. If you want to count being committed to a mental institution, I guess that was the only justice at all. He was never held accountable for the death of Renee Hartfelt. Justice was never really served for her death, even though everybody knew that Issei was the perpetrator. He had admitted everything to French authorities and also to the author that wrote that book about it. He tried to capitalize on his fame back in Japan, and he kind of succeeded in some ways. He wrote some books. He appeared in some like really gross, like snuff film type stuff, like gross stuff. But the general public was basically like, no, you're a piece of shit. Like, we're not going to let you just like live your life. And so he was harassed, and he tried to get a job a couple of times. There was one time he tried to get a job at a French language school. And the owner was going to give him the job because basically he was like, well, good for him. He used his real name. Like he wasn't ashamed. And all the employees were like, fuck
Absolutely
that.
not.
Yeah. And they all like banded together and were like, we will all quit and ruin your business if you hire this guy. And so like he didn't get that job, but it's stuff like that where people were just like, yeah, no, we're not going to do this. What are you talking about? And you're not going to hire him. So he really tried, though.
Sigh right there.
I know.
I mean, he really tried. So Issei's parents ended up both dying in 2005, and he was actually blocked by authorities from attending their funeral. He had to pay off their creditors, and after that, he had no money. Isn't that sad, you guys? He had to live in public housing and received welfare from the Japanese government because he didn't have enough money to live. Isn't that terrible? So later there was some kind of medical issue that he had that permanently damaged his nervous system, and he ended up needing daily care until he died of pneumonia in 2022, which was like a complication of whatever that medical issue was. So he really kind of had a shitty life toward the end there.
Imagine being the person that has to take care of him.
I mean, somebody had to do
better
it.
pay me some good money.
I know, right? So I wanted to end by focusing on Renee Hartfelt. She was the victim here. She's the only known victim of him. According to Issei, he attempted and made plans for other victims, but this is the only one that we know for sure that he admitted to, at least, of being successful. She was a 25-year-old literature student in France at the time of her death. She was beautiful, and partly that's why Issei chose her as his victim. He saw himself as small and ugly, which clearly...
He had small dick energy.
Exactly, yes.
Listen to Tuesday's episode.
Yes, he was only 4'9", a very small person. She was beautiful and she was tall, and he literally wanted to consume her beauty. That was his like thought process, that if he consumed her body, that her like essence would somehow transform
Yeah,
him.
we should just let this guy walk around. It's cool.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right. Which, you know, they did. So isn't that wonderful? So she had, you know, a 25-year-old student. She had her whole life ahead of her and instead became a victim to a sick piece of shit who had the money to keep himself out of trouble and kept himself from being held accountable.
I find it really hard that someone with that much impulsivity and mental illness only had one victim.
I was going to say, I'm
agree
pretty
with you.
sure
I agree with you.
there were more.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, you know, here Renee, instead of being able to go for her own dreams and her goals for her future, she becomes yet another woman victimized by violence of a man and the failings of the legal system. I tried to find information about Renee and could not find anything other than the details of what he did to her.
I feel like we've gotten better about not celebritizing the killer as much and like focusing on the victims.
Well, no, that's-
but back then
they didn't.
Because
Exactly.
you were trying to sell, right? You wanted to sell stories and stuff.
Yeah, I was trying to find like if her parents, you know, put out any kind of statement of, you know, we love our daughter, you know, here are these things about her, like an obituary. I couldn't find anything other than articles about him and the
It's really
details of the
sad.
crime.
That
It
is sad.
it really pissed me off. It really made me mad. Let's just keep shedding light on men's violence and also give a spotlight to the victims. Renee Hartfeld deserved to live her life in freedom instead of Issei Sagawa living his life in freedom and not to be forgotten as just the victim of a psychotic piece of shit while her murderer becomes famous. So justice for Renee Hartfeld. Isn't that insane though? Like the idea that you know who did it.
Yeah.
It's not a question. It's not like a mystery.
They admitted it.
It's not trying to figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
you know exactly who did it. You know exactly how they did it. You have all the evidence that you need. And he ends up walking free and
I
living
feel like
free
there's
forever.
almost too much bureaucracy sometimes because you hear
Yeah.
about this all the time on true crime podcasts. They're like, we know exactly who did it, but
Yeah.
we don't have like this
Enough
one
evidence to do it.
thing
Yeah.
that we need, right? Or they confessed and then they backtracked and we have evidence, but now they're saying they didn't do it.
Yeah. And again, like, I don't understand. I could not find specifics about like why the French authorities sent him back to Japan in the first place. Like, I don't know if it was a payoff from the wealthy dad. I don't know if it was political, like if he was paying people in Japan that were putting pressure on the French authorities. Like, I don't know what was going on there, but it's like, if you hadn't done that, he would have at least stayed in that mental institution forever.
Right.
But because you did that, he walked free and did God knows what. It from 1986 to 2002.
Well, and
You know
if
what I mean?
Have money. I feel like it's kind of easier to hide stuff.
100%. Yeah.
You know?
Especially in that time period, right?
Well,
It's
it's
like,
easy to keep
Well, and
people quiet
especially
too.
in a patriarchal culture
Yeah.
Yep.
that he lived in, right? Yeah.
But yeah, I searched. I was trying to find anything about this woman besides she was a 25-year-old student who was killed by this man, and that's all I could find. And it just made me
That's
so.
awful.
That is
it made me
terrible.
really, really mad. Justice for Renee Hartfeld. Issei, you suck.
That was awesome.
Oh man.
So that was my biggest revelation, and I guess that was your biggest revelation. Because
Yeah,
I piggybacked
yeah,
off of you
yeah,
for my deep dive.
I don't even know how to talk after that.
Bring us back up,
Okay.
Deb.
So my biggest revelation is that for being a serial killer, Rowan is really trusting.
He really
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
He just walked into another serial killer's house, didn't know he was the killer, drinks his wine, ends up all drugged up, which eventually leads him to eating quote unquote beef niçoise that is not beef at all, but actually human ass.
Butt beef.
Butt beef. It's butt beef. But like Rowan knows better,
Right.
right? And
Right.
I think that he thought, well, like if Sloane's going to go, she's like, there's a backup plan, right?
Yeah.
Like he must have just felt comfortable because she was there, but like,
Yeah.
she also got caught in a cage before. He probably
For
knows
real.
that
I know.
she's also vulnerable to attacks, and so they just need to be a little bit more careful.
I
Yeah.
get the impression that he was so enamored with her, though, that like he kind of just doesn't think correctly,
Oh, 100.
right?
Which I mean, we know because
yeah.
we've read this book, kind of gets him in a little bit trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
later, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he is focusing a little too much on his feelings for her and not keeping himself safe.
Distracted by those
little
gold
bit.
star boobies.
Yep.
Gold star tits.
Gold
Thank
star
you.
tits.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually don't like that word, which I think is weird because it's like, what's wrong with that word? I just don't like it.
I think sometimes it's been seen as a derogatory
maybe
term for breasts, but
Yeah.
I guess for me, when I think tits, I'm thinking like, how can I say this without being like offensive? Tits are different than boobs.
Yes.
In a good way,
Like
though.
in a sexy way?
Right.
Yes.
Like she has gold star boobs, and that doesn't come across the same way. They're tits in a good way because they're like gorgeous and
Gold
big.
star
and-
boobs sound like those were great boobs to feed babies with. And gold star tits is like, yowza.
Yeah. Gold star tits is like she doesn't need a lift because she's got it go. Like, you know what I mean? So like I'm not offended by that word if again it's used in a
I was
Non-derogatory.
gonna say, I'm not
Right,
offended by it. I just don't.
Just don't love it.
I would rather you call them chesticles than call them tits, which I feel like says a lot about me.
You cannot have gold star chesticles.
I think I do.
Whitney,
I know. I
I'm
have
going to
gold
tell
star
you
tits.
something.
I know.
You have tits.
I know.
I hate to break it to you, but also it's quite the compliment.
Yes.
You've got tits.
Thank you
honey.
so much.
You're so welcome. Do you not remember when you were pregnant? I looked at
I
you
do.
and said, you have pregnancy boobs. But I should have said you have pregnancy tits.
Well, I did too, because I think it was like 3 days later I found out I was pregnant.
It was the next day.
Was it the next day?
It was the next day because you
I knew
called
it was that
me.
same week.
I will never forget this. You called me and you said, "Don't get excited."
I was
And I said,
very freaked out.
I said, "What about what?" And you went, "I'm pregnant. Don't cheer."
I was very stressed.
And it wasn't that you weren't happy; it was just you were shocked.
Yeah.
Oh, I
by
was
it. Yeah.
freaking out.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
freaking
Because
out.
I was like, you need to take a pregnancy test because you were like choking on those suckers. You're like, I'm like a turtle trying to lay on my stomach over here.
I can't breathe. Well, let's keep talking about boobs.
And not your tits.
Let's talk about Sloane's and talk about our favorite spicy scene. There wasn't really spice, but there was like tension
So
and
I
cuteness.
accidentally earlier when I quoted what Rowan said about her being beautiful, I said that was
Yeah.
my favorite quote. It was actually my favorite spicy scene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, him like kind of fawning over her.
It was
saying
really
how
cute.
beautiful she was.
It was very sweet.
was
Mindy,
very
what was yours?
Well, once again, oh my God, Rowan gets hard at the most inappropriate times.
Yeah, he does.
He gets a hard on when he's watching Sloane make eye ornaments in her web,
Yeah, that was a
which
little
just
much.
makes me laugh. I'm like, dude, you need to get a handle on that thing.
It's got a mind of its own.
It definitely
apparently. Yeah, my favorite spicy scene, sweet scene, is when they're dancing together at the
that's
gala. It's really, really
I love that
just
he
nice.
kissed her pulse point when he sees her instead of her makeup, so he doesn't
Yes.
like mess
I
up her
know.
makeup.
Yeah, he's really
Yeah.
cute. I just love it so much. Her Sloane accepting that she wants more with him and like admitting that to herself that she doesn't want to just be friends and like this weird competition partner or whatever, but she wants to be with him romantically and putting herself out there. She asks him to dance and like is being vulnerable with him and like trying to be brave and have courage to like admit this to herself and to him. And both of them want to kiss each other when like he gets on the same page that she thinks it's a date, and it's just really sweet. I really like it a lot. I like the mushy love stuff.
It's definitely the turning point, I think, of their
I agree.
romance.
There's
Yeah.
really good banter and angst in this book.
Yeah.
It is.
So
yeah.
I have something interesting I want to add to this. So I was doing an art show last weekend, and I had like my bookmarks and like my sleeves and stuff there, and this woman comes in and picks up an exceptionally like spicy bookmark, right?
yeah.
And her husband or boyfriend is standing behind her, and I always ask people what they like to read
Yeah.
when they come into my booth, and like sometimes they're like really ashamed, like I like romantasy, and I always say there is nothing wrong with that. Read
Yeah.
what you want to read as long as you're reading. So he says, I was like so shocked. I want to like write a whole essay about this. He says she likes the Fae dick. And I was like, what? And like she turns red, and I was like, oh well, like tell me more about that. And she goes, oh well, you know, like I like ACOTAR and From Blood and Ash and all that. And I looked at him and I was like, well, why are you offended at that? And he goes, well, what am I going to do, like a 5'6" man without wings? And I was like, well, what you could do is pick up the book she's reading and learn from it. And I said, it has nothing to do with them being tall or having wings. I said, it has to do with the way that they treat her and the banter. And he did not like that I said that.
I bet.
But I was like, don't blame your inadequacies.
You're like, I'm trying to help you, dude.
Right.
It's an instruction manual,
fucking
sir.
pick up what she's reading. But like, he was so offended that she wanted to read this shit. And I'm like, okay, you're obviously inadequate. You could just like get into this with her. Yeah. You don't have, here's the thing. You could be 4'9", and you could have the banter and make a woman feel beautiful. Like, you don't have to do that. But yeah, it's like, I've been thinking about it ever since he said it.
He needs the Riz,
right?
As the kids would say.
Rowan has the Riz.
Rowan has the
nothing
Riz.
to do. I mean, sure, he's hot.
Yeah.
But he knows how to respect and treat a woman.
Right. Because there are a lot of attractive guys and
that
women that don't know how to treat their partners and are total douchebags.
And they
have SDE.
They get laid way less than a guy that's like 5'6" that does know how to treat a woman. Like, it was... I'm like, when is this guy going to learn? Because, dude, she's going to dump your ass eventually because you're kind of being an ass about what she's reading. Just let her read.
Yeah.
Enjoy the fruits of the book's
I know,
labors,
right?
What started
too. You know what I mean?
You were saying that what started it is he said that about her books, and I was like, oh, well, you get the fruit of her labors. And he's like, I'm not 6 foot with wings. And I was like, ugh. Do you really think she wants to?
You're one of those.
Do you actually think she is like, where's my wings?
Yeah.
That is not what she's thinking.
And you know, even if she is, you can order those from Amazon. They've got those fake ear things, ear cuffs you can put on. You can get some wings and just,
you could be her sweet, sweet fantasy baby.
Yes. Just, make it work.
Yeah. Sorry, that was kind of a sidebar, but when you said that, it reminded me about that.
Yeah. Well, no, some guys just don't get it. And if they picked up the book, they would get it. What about chapter MVPs? Who did you guys pick?
Okay, this is a hot take, but mine was Thorsten. Thorsten. But it's really for his love of art and how his choice of art tells us a little bit more about him. So there were 4 pieces of art that Sloane notices. So the first one was Edward Hopper. It's it's his most famous piece called Night Shadows. It's the one where the people are sitting in the diner. But that piece of work is all about solitude and alienation, even when other people are around you, which we see a lot with Thorsten. Thorsten. The second one was Andrew Prokos, and he did a piece of work called Falcon Oculus 2. And the point of that work was to capture warped reflections of buildings and people.
Ooh, warped reflections.
Yeah.
I like that.
The third one was John Singer Sargent's A Dinner Table at Night, and it's a social commentary about the obsession of wealth, which we also see Thorsten do
with him. Yeah.
Right. And finally, Felix Vallotton, who did the piece called The Waltz. This artist is known for using scenes suggesting seduction. That's really hard. You guys say it.
No, that's a tongue twister.
Seduction without romance or love.
Oh.
Which is also what Thorsten's doing. He's kind of seducing
It's a lure.
into like, come eat with me and like do all this stuff. And he's using like his wealth and capturing them in his own like little web. So I thought it was really interesting how she used those 4 pieces of work in the book.
I'm really glad that you did that because I wrote those down and I wrote, are these real?
Yes, they are.
Because that's how dumb I am.
In your defense, my degree is in art.
Well, yeah.
Right. So one other thing I wanted to say about him is he does have a call out to Silence of the Lambs and cannibalism.
Yes.
Because he talks about how he loves a nice glass of Chianti.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I clocked that too.
I missed that.
Yeah. I wrote the Chianti Hannibal Lecter Easter egg in my notes. Mindy, who was your chapter MVP?
Mine was Sloane. She's just a badass that totally had to carry Rowan during that dinner.
Yeah.
And she's just so intelligent, and her mapping after a kill, while creepy as fuck, is just pure mastermind material, right? Like,
genius.
You have to be smart to come up with that, right?
100%. Yeah.
I just love her.
Yeah, she's my chapter MVP too, for basically all the same reasons. I wrote she was where all the action is in this section.
Yes.
Like, she is driving this part of the story forward. She's does all
driven
the
all the kills.
Well,
so far.
that's true.
I mean,
well,
she really has. Rowan
discovered No, Sloane discovered.
Yeah. Sloane discovered.
That's true. She figured that out
he's
first.
like, oh, she found him, so now I'm going to like show up.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, she does all the research on Thorsten. And again, in my notes, I wrote Thurston. she kills the bad guy. She takes care of Rowan after being roofied. She has we find out that her motivation for her unhinged serial killing is pretty pure motivation. You know, she's trying to make the world a better place and protect people, which really makes you like her even more.
Yeah.
And she decides, you know, like I said earlier, she's vulnerable and courageous, going to the gala with Rowan and asking him to dance. Like she's driving it all forward. I love her. I love her just as much as I love him. What about a favorite secondary character? Who did you guys pick?
Okay, mine's a little off the cuff.
So is mine.
So is mine.
My favorite secondary character is Cookies and Cream Ice Cream. And I'm going to repeat what Sloane said, because it is really hard to find a substitution for salt. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you about ice cream flavors as disgusting as that one, but I do have 7 flavors that adventurous eaters may want to try.
Oh.
So first, and Mindy, you'll definitely want to try this. There is a cicada ice cream.
No, thank you.
Mindy has a Ring video of cicada like attacking her on her porch, and she literally almost fucking falls off. And I'm sorry, it is so funny.
It's hysterical.
It really is
my gosh! When I need to laugh, I watch that video. It
needs to be like on America's Funniest Home Videos. It's so good. Okay, so you can get cicada ice cream from Sparky's Homemade Ice Cream, and it's cicadas covered in chocolate and put into brown sugar ice cream.
That's a no from me, dog.
No, thank you.
Okay, so next we have vanilla ice cream from Lick Me I'm Delicious, which sounds normal, right? Lick Me I'm Delicious is in there.
I was going to say, lick me, I'm delicious. Does not sound normal.
Okay, this ice cream maker adds proteins that make jellyfish glow. So when you lick the ice cream, they activate and you get a luminescent scoop.
Oh,
Isn't that
that's
cool?
really
That's
cool.
odd.
Yeah.
But cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would totally
that's cool.
eat that.
That's an experience.
Yeah. So speaking of protein, you can get pet bird ice cream from the Torimi Cafe. It's not actual birds.
It makes me think of Dumb and Dumber.
Pretty bird.
Yeah, pretty bird.
So it's not actually birds, but the things that birds eat, like nuts and seeds and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So if you would like to eat an actual animal in your dessert, you can consume lobster ice cream from Ben and Bill's. And it is buttered lobster mixed into vanilla ice cream. Which I don't like lobster that much anyway, to be honest. It always seems kind of like fatty and gamey to me. And
I love lobster, but
that.
not.
I don't think I would want it sweet.
No.
So, speaking of weird-ass savory things that you can get in ice cream, you can grab Thanksgiving dinner from the ice cream store in Delaware.
Gross.
It's vanilla ice cream with egg yolks, tomato, green beans, and potatoes.
No, you lost me at tomatoes.
Yeah. And then it's
What is
topped...
Thanksgiving about tomatoes?
I don't know. So
That's a good question.
But it's then topped with sugar and hot sauce.
Oh,
so you
as
get your
you
whole
do.
Thanksgiving meal within the ice cream.
Well, I will say I was like, please don't tell me they put like stuffing in ice cream or
so
something.
there was one I didn't list that was like ham and corn or
Ew.
something. So, okay,
thank
so if the
you.
Thanksgiving dinner one isn't weird enough for you, you can visit an amusement park in Tokyo that offers an assortment of horse flesh, cow tongue, and squid flavors. And finally, let's talk about Eskimo ice cream, which is sweetened with fresh berries, but the base is actually made with animal fat instead of milk.
Ew.
Honestly, I bet that's really good.
It probably is really good.
I bet it tastes great.
I don't know. I feel like I might have a texture issue with
Well,
that.
that might be true.
Yeah. So those are the strangest ice creams
Yeah.
I could find. I mean, there were some weirder things like corn and stuff, but these are things where you'd really have to think about it before you ate it, I think.
Yeah. The cicadas. I can't get over that.
Okay, I would eat cicadas over semen ice cream, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it was like one or
I
the
would
other.
eat any of those over semen ice cream.
The only thing that would be just as bad as semen ice cream would be human rump roast ice cream.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
semen still beats that.
Yeah.
That's pretty gross.
Yeah. I mean, at least you know it's creamy.
Anyway.
Sorry, that's into my deep dive.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Mindy, what was your, or who or what was your favorite secondary character?
Mine were gold stars given out to adults and boobs.
Mine was Gold Star Boobs.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, I
That's
just think
so
it's
funny.
hilarious. I want to start doing that. I'm going to give out gold stars to
I
everybody.
love it.
Yeah.
I love the gold star.
Yeah.
That's
That's
funny.
funny.
Those are my favorite secondary characters.
Do you have stickers for Whitney?
Next time.
I should have brought
Next time.
those.
Yeah, I wrote, that just made me laugh a lot, that whole little piece. And I said, I think that this is an important part of Rowan's love for Sloane. It's her gold star.
I also didn't realize kind of how early in this book we meet Lark, because
I know,
the
me
next
either.
book is about her. And
Yeah,
you
I was the
see
same way.
this exuberant personality, right?
Yeah.
That I thought that it was much later in this book that you met her, but I love the gold star tits.
Yeah, it made me laugh a lot. That's so funny. We picked that.
I know,
that
we're on the same
thing.
wavelength.
We really are. We're the same. Let's talk about favorite quotes. We've already mentioned a couple as we've been talking. There are just too many to choose from.
You all will be shocked, but I only have one.
I narrowed
Oh.
it down to one,
It's
too.
long, though. It's
I
a long
didn't.
one.
I didn't. Mindy, you go ahead with what yours was.
All right, so mine's actually kind of a banter. So it's when Sloane says, "You probably think I should take up crochet and acquire 12 cats and start yelling at the children to get off my lawn." And Rowan says, "Never." Well, maybe the yelling at neighborhood children part. I'll always condone that.
Yeah.
But this Blackbird, this is art. And that's when he's talking about her web with
webs,
such
yeah.
awe.
Yeah, that was really
Again,
sweet.
he's such a simp.
So
Yes,
mine
yeah.
also was Sloane to Rowan, but it was, I had to dig human ass out of your mouth.
That's one of mine. Yeah.
Well, I just envision while he's passed out, her going over and taking her fingers and like scraping.
Doing the thing that you learn in CPR.
That was one of mine. And I had another one that made me laugh and then one that I thought was really sweet. The one that made me laugh is when Sloane says, "I think we're officially best friends now." And Rowan says, "Oh, yeah? You want to go do karate in the garage?" That made me laugh. I just thought that was so
Reminds
funny.
me of Step Brothers.
Yes. And then the one that I thought was sweet, Rowan, while he's being roofied, he says, "No one competes with Sloane. She just hasn't realized it yet."
I wrote that down.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
So sweet. What questions do you guys have at this point that you would like to see resolved?
My big one is, what's up with David? He is sitting there eating semen ice cream,
David's kind of weird.
but he also understands directions, right?
Yeah,
He
that's
can,
true.
He can help prep the food. He can bring
Yeah.
the food out, right? He goes back with Rowan to Boston. He
Yeah.
can load a dishwasher, so he understands things.
Right.
But what's up with that?
Well, part of that comes from the whole lobotomy issue, which is something that I didn't really, you think you know what it's about, but I'd had no idea how,
Ooh, are you going to tell us?
I am. So the word itself, lobotomy, it comes from the Latin word lobus, which means lobe, duh, but as in the brain lobe, and then the medical suffix tomi, which means a cutting. So cutting the brain lobe.
Yeah.
So before the advent of antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds, patients with mental illness were very, very misunderstood. Dangerous treatments could include insulin comas and electric shock therapy.
This is why people don't want to say they have anxiety problems.
Right?
For real, yeah.
I mean, it was super misunderstood back.
If you do have an anxiety problem, it's completely fine. Get on some meds. There's plenty out
We
there.
all do. So
Yep.
Yep.
in Portugal, though, during the mid-30s, a physician named Egas Moniz developed a procedure that we now refer to as the lobotomy, who, believe it or not, actually won a Nobel Peace Prize in medicine for this development.
Oh, no.
I had no idea.
I didn't know that.
I'm
So
interested to find out if there's anything good about a lobotomy, but I'm sure you'll get there. Okay.
I don't know.
Spoiler alert, probably not.
I mean, back then, I think they really believed that
Sure,
it
yeah.
was something that would work. So the idea was to permanently damage part of the front of the brain. And the weird logic for this was that neurons were not wired correctly. So when you sever the connections, you treat the disease.
Right. They
So-
can't cause problems if you stop them
because
from
they're
working.
not. Yeah. So, of course, this procedure is totally discredited, and I think people have even petitioned for him to get his Peace Prize taken
Well,
away.
he
And all
already
that.
spent his $1 million. He's
Right?
Get $1 million.
I
when
know,
he won that
I know.
prize. So he's like, dude, I already spent it. It's fine.
Yeah.
So a few stats about lobotomies. By 1951, about 20,000 of them had been performed in the U.S.
Gosh.
A large number of patients were actually gay men. More lobotomies were performed on women, though. Some studies showing that up to 74% of cases were female.
Because we're so hysterical.
I was just about to say. I mean, what else are you supposed to do?
I
with
mean,
this?
carrying the whole household and trying to be a good wife and take care of the kids and do all that shit. Why do we have anxiety problems?
Because sometimes we get sad and we cry.
No, you get hysterical.
Yeah. So, or we talk too much.
You get the vapors.
Or we have an opinion.
And this is something that I should have known or like thought more of, but the mortality rate in the 1940s was 5% of lobotomies.
Oh, so like all of the mortality rate, 5% of all mortality was lobotomies?
No, all 5% of all lobotomies ended in death. Sorry, yes.
And most of those would have been women because most lobotomies were performed on women.
Yes.
The violence of men against women.
Stop it.
Female rage.
Why are we so pissed off?
Sorry.
Oh my gosh, we're like a PSA.
This is a very special episode of Our Nerdiest Thing.
So, moving into the U.S., Walter Freeman is the name of the man who performed the first lobotomies here. And he often referred to them as, quote, surgically induced childhood.
Oh,
right? Like,
didn't you see that as a problem?
Like, I don't understand why anybody would think that sounds okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
He probably had a little dick.
He didn't. He probably did. So he didn't
I'm on a roll today.
He didn't like that the original procedure, you had to drill 2 holes in the skull. So he developed a method of getting to the frontal lobes much quicker by going through the eye sockets.
Oh, like they do on Clockwork Orange?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
He practiced the method with an ice pick from his home on grapefruits and then cadavers. That sounds delightful, doesn't it?
That sounds the same.
Yep.
That's so crazy.
One of his patients...
Grapefruit. Like, dude.
He went from grapefruit to cadavers.
I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but I feel like the scientific method was still like
I feel
more
like he
advanced
just
than
like,
that,
what am I
you know?
going to do with all these grapefruits?
I got this
crazy.
ice pick here. Let's try something
I mean,
out.
I guess I'm glad he didn't start with people.
I guess. I don't know.
But
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions.
So one of his patients was a 29-year-old woman, of course. Following the surgery, was described as a, quote, smiling, lazy, and satisfactory patient with the personality of an oyster.
What they mean is quiet and docile.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and she couldn't remember the doctor's name and kept repeatedly pouring coffee out of an empty coffee pot.
Oh, that's fucking awful.
I know, isn't that terrible? This is the kind of thing. But like at that point, that was better than
that was
being
successful.
being sad and anxious. Like, it just blows my mind.
Calm.
So, and then when her parents were having trouble adjusting to her new behaviors, Freeman suggested a series of rewards and punishments.
Oh, yeah.
So the reward was give her ice cream, but her punishment was to smack her. I'm like,
was this Dr. Thorsten?
right? Like,
I
this
mean-
is just, it's unfathomable to me that
thought
this was
process.
like, yeah, like I just don't get where
That was cutting edge science.
I cannot
Isn't
think
that
like
crazy?
that. Yeah. Some benefits were actually recorded, probably because they were essentially creating vegetables. So,
Yeah.
like, they weren't, doing crazy stuff.
I mean, you are going to have decreased experience of anxiety.
yes, you
Decreased
definitely
I mean,
are. Yeah.
It's like technically
But they're
it is
not
a
going to feel
success.
anything.
Right.
So, but there were all kinds of side effects, of course, that were noted. So, you could end up with intracranial hemorrhage, epilepsy, a brain abscess, dementia, death, of course, reduced body function, and reduced self-control.
Gosh.
So one of the most famous lobotomies, like that people talk about, was actually one of the Kennedys. So JFK's, I think she was the oldest daughter, but she was younger than he was. So yes, those Kennedys.
It was JFK's daughter or sister?
Sister. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Did I say
Sister.
daughter? I meant sister. So supposedly during her birth, the doctor wasn't immediately available due to the Spanish influenza breakout. And it required so many doctors to spread themselves really thin. So the nurse didn't want the baby to come before the doctor could get there. So she ordered this pregnant mother to keep her legs closed,
Yeah.
which kept the baby's head in the birth canal for almost 2 hours. Like, it's no wonder that she's developed some sort of intellectual disability, right?
Lack of
So that's where
oxygen.
that all started.
Yeah.
Her family kept it completely secret from everybody because, they're in the public eye, in politics, and basically like paraded her around to prove that she was, quote, normal. Like they would bring her to like dance functions and political things. Her father in particular was worried that her behavior would shame and embarrass the family and damage his children's political careers because that's more important, of course.
He was like a political stage mom, basically.
Yes. Yeah. And he would often use the R word instead of mentally ill as protection 100%. For JFK during his presidential run.
Mm-hmm.
Like, ugh.
What a stand-up guy.
Yeah, doesn't he sound great? So as a young adult, her family thought she was becoming even more irritable and difficult. She would suffer convulsions and violent rages. So her father arranged this lobotomy for her at age 23. And if that's the criteria for it, I probably should have been lobotomized long ago because I definitely have violent rages. Not that violent, but like, I mean, like I was I'm irritable and difficult like
you've never,
on a daily basis.
Punched me in the face or anything.
No, but I definitely am irritable and difficult.
Right.
She's like, I've thought about it.
That's fine. Sometimes I've deserved it, but I would say, like, did they just look at every teenager and think, right?
Like, I mean, this is like normal behavior when you're trying to like go through stuff, and she's already she does have a little bit of like incapacity from having lack of oxygen when she's being bored.
I wonder now what her diagnosis might be from that lack of oxygen.
Like, I know,
if it was like a CP or like something like that.
Something.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have theories based on her symptoms and stuff, but I don't know.
So after the surgery, the doctor noted that he thought Rosemary was not intellectually disabled, but rather suffered from depression. So after he's already cut out her frontal lobe.
Right.
Oh, whoops. Cut out the wrong part.
So not surprisingly, her function declined. She had the mental capacity of a toddler. She could not walk or talk coherently, and she was incontinent at the age of 23.
Yep.
Yeah. So she had to be institutionalized for the remainder of her life, and her mother didn't even visit her for 20 years, and she was kept hidden from the public eye. Her condition wasn't even revealed to anyone until 1962 when her sister mentioned it during an interview with the Saturday Evening Post.
Yeah, she was like the dirty family secret.
Yeah. So thankfully we don't need to use such invasive measures anymore because we know so much more about mental illness and that we can treat it other ways and that it's not a disease necessarily like that can be fixed with surgery, but that's something that it's a real thing, guys, and it blows my mind that, and I get that we've got all this like technological advancement and that we just didn't know and like, but it's really difficult for me as a thinking human being to feel like I just don't understand how somebody could think that was okay.
Do you remember, though, in season 2 when we were doing From Blood and Ash and I talked about beauty ideals and the shit that we were currently doing to ourselves, that scientists are like, stop it.
Yeah.
And how we used to, like, people would go in for like 18-hour x-rays to get rid of body hair. Yeah. It's the same shit where like you are put into this proposed ideal of what you're supposed to look like and act like and do all these things.
We're going to make you like this.
Right. Yeah. You're going to be almost Stepford wifey in all cases, right? And when she wasn't, they wanted to fix it and they just made it worse.
Yeah.
Whereas if the doctor would have just fucking let her deliver, right?
One positive thing that came from all of that is Rosemary inspired her sister Eunice Kennedy Shriver to start the Special Olympics.
That is true.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I forgot about that. I had read that, but I didn't put it in my notes. But yeah, that is so definitely there were some positive things that came out of it. But like, I mean, she was alone for most of the rest of her life and her parents wouldn't even come see her.
Before she was like a functioning adult.
Yeah.
And then she had to have like round the clock care for the rest of her life until she died. Yeah.
It's just sad. It's just very sad.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that story. Thank you for sharing it. But also, let's not do fucked up things to people, okay?
Absolutely.
Right.
That's like the whole episode. Let's not do fucked up things.
I know, right?
The moral of the story is...
Did you guys have any other questions that you wanted to
I had
resolve?
one question. So I know the meat at the dinner was not kosher. But Sloan ate some other stuff. Like she just assumed the goat cheese and the soup were okay. But
I thought about this too.
I mean, those could have had semen or blood in them.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
Did she partake into some accidental cannibalism? Possibly?
I had mixed feelings about that because I thought the exact same thing, but I think that maybe we're supposed to think that the first course would have not been anything weird, but the later courses, he's assuming that they're going to be drugged.
Yeah,
True.
And so, you know
Okay,
what I
that
mean?
makes sense.
And so, like, maybe he
Like-
wouldn't sneak it in at the beginning, so because people are going to be more aware and like.
Well, she
Right.
even
you know?
notices he drinks from the first bottle of wine.
I think maybe we're supposed to think that like the roofies haven't hit yet.
Gotcha.
And so maybe there's not anything weird in the food at that point.
I hope so.
But I thought the exact
it made
same
me,
thing.
made my stomach turn a little bit. I
Yeah,
was
like if you know that you're not supposed to drink the wine, like why are you eating
Yeah.
any of this? Yeah, I thought the
Right.
exact
I mean,
same thing.
maybe you could eat like the lettuce.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't
Yeah.
even trust that, honestly.
Right. But I mean, she has to play the part a little bit.
I know,
Yeah, that's
I
true.
know.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that was part of it too. I only had one question, and it was one of the chapters. I can't remember which one, but one of the chapters is titled Discordia. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so I looked it up, and this was going to be my deep dive. And then it was just like, oh, that's not that interesting. So I did Issei Sagawa instead. But Discordia is the goddess of chaos. The Roman goddess of chaos, which is what later in that same chapter he calls Sloane the goddess of chaos,
Okay.
standing in the middle of her map.
Drink is called.
And that
I
is what the
love
drink is
it.
called.
Way to go,
Yeah.
Whit.
Yeah, I was just like, oh.
When you said that, I'm like, Discordia.
Yes, I did the exact same thing. Yes.
I actually do have another little tidbit that I meant to mention when we were talking about cannibalism.
Ooh.
So this is
Tell
a
me
quote,
everything.
a quote fun fact. So in how many U.S. states do you think cannibalism is illegal?
Illegal?
Not enough.
All of them? God.
There's only one U.S. state in which cannibalism is illegal.
Like on the books, a
Yeah.
law. Ew.
Idaho.
So
I was
if
going to
you,
say, I
like,
bet it's not us.
It's not Kentucky.
if you found a dead body, you could like eat it and not
Yeah.
go to jail.
yeah. You could lawfully do that. Like it's not.
They would get you probably for desecration of a corpse. But
Okay, well, good. 'cause-
yeah. That's so weird.
I know.
It's one of those things that maybe people are like, we don't need to say this, right?
Right.
We don't need to
Did
say
you
it.
ever see the movie or read the book Alive about the plane crash?
The soccer team.
I never wanted to watch it or read
It actually was a very interesting story, but
Yeah.
It's more about
Ooh.
survival.
It's
than that.
definitely
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
not serial
It's not,
killer. It's survival.
No, it's
Right.
not. They don't kill them. They only do it to the bodies that are already dead.
Right.
But
right.
but you know, it's like that's like. Can you
That's
imagine
rough.
being so desperate that that's where you have to go? Ooh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was shocked that there's
That's
only
so
one
crazy
state out
to
of
me.
50 that
I feel like in the
felt the need to put that on the law books.
in 2024, maybe let's write it down.
Also, who in Idaho made them go, fuck, we got to make it a law?
I know, right? Somebody
Somebody
you know,
was like,
somebody
"Ah,
did.
shit, we gotta
Good grief.
take care of that."
Well, what are you guys looking forward to as we keep going in this book?
Oh, Sloane and Rowan have been circling each other for 3 years at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
I need them to fucking do it.
I wrote the exact
Yes.
same thing. I said
3 years.
These crazy kids need to get their crap together and just be together. It's been almost 3 years of this nonsense. That's what I wrote down.
Both of them are beautiful, but they need to bump uglies.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even their uglies are beautiful, probably.
Probably.
She did say that she bets that Rowan has a pretty dick
Yeah.
in the first chapter.
I mean, everything else is pretty. Why not? Yeah. Well, friends, listeners.
Well, see ya.
Well, see you later. That's all for today's episode. Listen in next week. We'll be discussing Butcher and Blackbird, chapters 13 through 15.
Bye, everybody. Like what you heard in this episode? Follow Our Nerdiest Thing on Instagram at instagram.com/Our Nerdiest Thing or Facebook at facebook.com/Our Nerdiest Thing. We love hearing from fellow nerds. Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com.